Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room for DisrupTV, the first episode for 2026. We're going to introduce our guests in reverse order as we normally do. And more importantly, we're going to ask them where they're coming in from, what are we talking about today? And of course, we'll then kick off the show. So here with my awesome co-founder, co-host, Vala Afshar. We're here with our producer, Elle, as well. And of course, our guests. So real quick, Ken, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Yeah, so thanks for having me join. I'm calling in from the East Village in New York City, and I hope to talk a bit about leadership and how it can make a difference to people in different ways in different places in their organizations.
I know this adaptive leadership is going to be huge, so thanks for being here. André, where are you coming in from?
I am in the Middle East at the moment. And a major theme for my thoughts this evening relates to AI and cybersecurity.
Yes, that's going to be changing quite some bit. And Dr. David Bray, welcome back. Are we still in the blast radius?
Yes, still in the blast radius, somewhere in the perimeter of Washington, D.C., not in space, although who knows, could get kicked out the window. Looking forward to both joining André to talk about how tech in particular is impacting geopolitics and leadership, and maybe sort of serving some things up for Ken when he does his part. What does this mean for how do we lead differently?
Well, that's wonderful. All right, well, with that, let's do the count. Get your socials ready. All yours, Elle.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My co-host reminded me this is our 10-year anniversary of the show. So thank you for being with us for the last decade. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. Please follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, the guy I've been sitting next to virtually for 10 years, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Breaking news, he might be working on his next book, which he may or may not want to talk about in the next hour. He's on TV. I see him every day. I don't know, CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business, CNN. He's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Mr. Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Vala Afshar. As he mentioned, he's the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless and Autonomous. And of course, Autonomous is where the future is happening. I keep these two books with me all the time. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful thoughts and tweets. And when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets, Bloomberg, and of course, posting his insightful analyses on ZDNet. Vala is one of the top keynoters in the world, so don't ever forget that. So with that, we're going to talk to our amazing guests, which is why we're here, more importantly. And of course, who do we have to kick it off today?
I need to have my parents listen to that intro. That's pretty cool. Well, we have two incredible guests. We have André Pienaar, Chief Executive and founder of C5 Capital. And with André, we have our first ballot Hall of Fame inductee to DisrupTV, Dr. David Bray, distinguished chair of the Accelerator Stimson Center and president and CEO of LDA Ventures. André is a cybersecurity space and energy investor as the CEO and chair and founder of C5 Capital. He seeks out opportunities to grow companies in these sectors. C5 Capital is a venture capital and private equity firm specializing in investments within the cybersecurity, cloud infrastructure, and clean energy sectors. The firm focuses on supporting companies that address critical global challenges, particularly in the areas of national security, data protection, and environmental sustainability. In addition to his corporate board, he's also a corporate board member. He serves on advisory council of the U.S. Institute of Peace and U.S. government agencies dedicated to global conflict resolution. He's a member of the Atlantic Council Task Force on Critical Infrastructure and Cybersecurity. André developed and stood up the Cyber Alliance to defend our healthcare and volunteer coalition of 36 cybersecurity companies to protect the healthcare sector from cyber attacks during the global pandemic. André currently serves on several boards, including Lennar in Israel, Haven Group in Luxembourg, and ITC Secure in UK. Welcome, André, to DisrupTV.
Great to be on the show.
I had to shorten your bio. We only have 20 minutes. You do a lot. I'm going to do the same for our next guest. You guys who watch this show are very familiar with Dr. Bray, but PhD and distinguished fellow and chair of the Accelerator Loomis Council at the nonpartisan Henry L. Stimson Center. Dr. Bray is a distinguished fellow with business executive for national security and CEO and transformation leader for different under the radar tech and data ventures. Dr. Bray is principal at Lead Do Adapt Ventures. He has received both the Joint Civilian Service Commendation Award and the National Intelligence Exceptional Achievement Medal. Business Insider named Dr. Bray 24 Americans who are changing the world under 40, and the World Economic Forum named him a young global leader. Welcome back, First Ballot Hall of Fame inductee to DisrupTV.
Thank you, Vala. Thank you, Ray. It's always great to be here. You can always just say, we just found this guy in the street. We thought he might be interesting.
Yeah, we know. I wish I could say that about our guests, but you all are trailblazers doing good things. So thanks for coming back.
Well, hey, one of the big things we're talking about this year is really about boards. And one of the things that we see is really these boardroom wake-up calls that are happening. André, we're 1 week into 2026. What's the single biggest technology investment decision boards should be thinking about in Q1? And really, that will determine whether they're competitive or obsolete by year's end.
Ray, I have to say that the focus should be on cybersecurity. We've seen a marked increase of very sophisticated cybersecurity attacks in 2025, which has been a year-on-year trend, particularly from adversary nation states. And most worrying in 2025, the first use of autonomous cybersecurity attacks. Closely correlated with cybersecurity, definitely how CEOs and C-suite leadership groups are thinking about AI adoption and where they are on their AI adoption journey. Unfortunately, these two topics are very closely correlated with each other, because you can't craft an AI adoption strategy without first thinking about how you're going to secure it and what role cybersecurity will play in this process. So those are definitely the two top things that I would press on any chief executive.
Let me jump in a little real quick here. So we were robbing cybersecurity budgets to pay for AI last year. And now you're telling me that we can't rob either one of them. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly right. You can't rob either one of them. In fact, the logical thing to do here, the sensible thing to do here, the right thing to do here would be to increase both those budgets and to bear in mind how the two budgets are very closely correlated. In the world of cybersecurity, AI-based attacks are definitely the most near and present danger, and the thing that should be on the mind not only of the CISO, but of the board's risk committee and of the chief financial officer, the chief risk officer, and the chief executive.
What percentage of boards do not have cybersecurity and AI in their 1A, 1B priority? Or do they all agree with you?
In the case of Fortune 500 companies, definitely these are topics for discussion at a board level. But in terms of actually giving it priority and being properly organized and funded to address them, to make sure that both the upside is optimized and the downside are mitigated, I think that's still a very modest percentage. Most Fortune 500 companies talk about being at more or less the 1% in terms of their AI adoption journey. Very, very few companies where you can point at them being really mature and advanced and developed. So there's a lot of scope here to educate people, to focus people, and for leadership.
Andre, before we jump back to David, I do have a question for you. I've heard this in many board conversations in the last 6 months, and the discussion was about lowering their premiums for cybersecurity to reduce the risk to be attacked. Because as you know, all the attacks have only been up to the premiums, the premium payout amounts. And so do you actually say, hey, I'm only going to insure to 10 million instead of 100 million so that you're only going to be liable for 10 million and lower your deductibles? What do you think about that?
That's a great question. It's a bit like kidnap for ransom insurance used to be in the past. Most companies kept the fact that they had kidnap for ransom insurance highly confidential so that the kidnappers might not be tempted by their premiums to claim their ransom. And so I would recommend high levels of confidentiality about the nature of your cybersecurity insurance. And corporations and C-suite should do a much better job at keeping the details and the exact arrangements they've got in place for ransomware insurance highly confidential. But the other part of this is that with ransomware attacks, we're now back more or less where we started, where the hackers are increasingly leaking the data.
Yes.
So they're not demanding that the ransom be paid. They're leaking the data with a view to damaging the corporation's brand, to damaging the credibility of the C-suite leadership, and in doing so creates a whole myriad of liabilities for the company and the executives. And unfortunately, money can't mitigate this risk in terms of a ransom payment. So it's all back to basics and to building cyber resilience.
David, as you're advising CEOs and companies, how do they stress test their cybersecurity AI investment thesis? What do you expect are going to be the biggest threats in the next 12 months to companies, to their global supply chains, and just overall business continuity?
So in some respects, that's a great question to build on what Andre just shared. When I talk to boards, I usually point out we've seen a doubling up until the last 2 years. So if you go back to 2019, the average ransomware payout was about $5,000 US dollars. By 2020, it was up to about 50,000. So that's a 10x increase. Then things started to do 5x. We were up to $250,000 as a ransomware payout a year after that. And then we've seen doublings. And again, these are hard to extract because exactly as Andre says, people don't usually advertise how much they pay out. But we're probably in the ballpark of 500,000 to 600,000 is an average payout. And there's probably much larger ones. But as Andre said, that now means we are facing well-funded non-state actors who probably have an investment budget that can throw $500 million, if not $1 billion, into developing the next wave of AI cyber offensive tools to go after your company. And then, as Andre said, what we're seeing more and more is they're finding that they can actually make money by shorting. If you're a publicly traded stock, they short your stock, do an embarrassing event, and guess what? They made way more money than they would if you ever paid anything out. So the stress test for companies is, what are you going to do if you're a publicly traded company and someone is going to do this to your stock? What are the ways that you can get early signals? But then the upside, I also say, because I don't want to just be all doom and gloom, I actually think exactly as Andre was saying, with the convergence of cybersecurity and AI, especially as we move to what people are calling agentic AI, in which we're going to let the AI do things on its own in a semi-autonomous, if not autonomous fashion, that should be a case for the CEO to go to the board and say, look, we're going to upgrade our cybersecurity as well as our AI in parallel, because as we roll out AI agents, there's always the risk that it's not a cybersecurity attack, it's just an AI agent going rogue. But that's where we want the same, what I would call patterns of life. So instead of relying on cyber forensics, we're actually trying to figure out patterns of life. Is the agent doing something it's not supposed to, possibly because it has been hacked, but possibly because it's just been, it's been given wrong instructions. And so you can actually make the case that to get ready for the next wave of AI, you have to upgrade your cybersecurity posture. And the return on investment is trust of your partners, trust of your clients, trust of your customers. That's the ROI.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. And I would say that, it's these overlapping. We got a little note here from Esteban. Boards are still talking about cybersecurity in their top 3 areas as being committed from the last 5 years. Top 1 is still there, but cybersecurity overlaps with all this, and it's definitely an important product. It's not standalone, and it's definitely seeing that as well. But this takes us to the point, Andre, as cybersecurity comes into play and quantum computing starts to emerge, and quantum cryptography breaks all the stuff that we have.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? What could go wrong, right? And so the question, Andre, is quantum computing, is it hype in 2026, or is it actually going to make a difference for business? Should boards be investing here? We just went by the Quantinuum booth at CES, talking about where they are and the gains that they've made in error correction, gains that they've made in terms of stable qubits. Is it real? Are we going to see this?
Great progress in building quantum computing capacity, and the US continues to be the world leader in this field. The good news for boards is Q-Day, the day when we reach the capability threshold, when hackers can bust through our current cryptography systems, is unlikely to arrive in 2026. So this should be a medium to long-term priority from a cybersecurity point of view in terms of establishing post-quantum cryptography. And fortunately, the US government has a whole range of initiatives to help both the country and companies prepare for this as a likely and important threat over the course of the next decade.
David, expand on this with the lens on AI. You have diverging regulations and policies, EU, US, China. If you're a multinational company, how do you shape the governance so you can avoid getting caught in, regulatory crossfire?
So I think you hit the nail on the head. I would say probably every company right now is in violation of at least one AI statute somewhere. And that's just the reality. Now, that said, you don't even have to go outside of the United States to have these challenges. Right before the government shutdown that happened in October and mid-September, I got asked to be a expert witness on a public hearing about AI. And even in September of last year, we were up to more than 1,000 pieces of state-level legislation that had either been passed or was in draft form across the 50 different states. And so this was a debate between, because for some mysterious reason, when the US Constitution was signed, the founders forgot to mention who gets to manage AI.
That was a big miss.
You forgot. But anyway, so by default, it's a state right. But one of the things that's worth knowing in the founding of the country, when the Declaration of Independence came out, they actually lamented that even the colonies were doing toll booths between the different colonies. And they said, you can't do that. And that's actually why we are allowed to have interstate commerce that's done at the federal level. So we're still trying to sort out in the United States, what is an AI framework that can actually work across the 50 different states so that small to mid-sized businesses don't have the problem of 50 different regulations and have to hire a fleet of lawyers to navigate the different AI policies of the different states. But you're absolutely right. Then you go outside the United States. Now you've got Europe. Now you've got Canada. If you do business in the Pacific and countries like that, you've got challenges there as well. So I would say, right now, until we get some clarity as to where the policies, both within the United States, but also outside the United States, are going, you're going to really have to compartmentalize what you do AI and data-wise. I would not recommend to boards right now to try to have some global AI effort because, like I said, it will be in violation of someone's laws. You really have to make it country-specific, and in case of the United States, you may have to make it state-specific, especially if you're operating in California.
So when do you see this harmonization alignment happening? Last week, we celebrated the 17th year of the first Bitcoin mined, and we still don't have clarity when it comes to crypto.
Yeah, so I think you've hit on the reality of our era right now. Let's face it, at the international level, there is no effective forum to come together. As much as I love the UN is not going to make any progress on this. The Security Council is divided. And so I don't think we're going to have clarity anytime soon. If anything, what I would love to see, remember, the UN actually replaced the League of Nations. I've been recommending for a while, do we need to have a league or united cities where different cities work to harmonize things? Because actually then that's where the rubber meets the road. And you could have cities like Singapore alongside Dubai, alongside New York and San Francisco. I think there's going to need to be some sort of new network approach as opposed to geography-based approach to rationalize these things. In terms of the United States, the reality is we've got the midterms coming up. As much as I would love to see Congress not create new policy, but upgrade things like the privacy law of 1974, upgrade HIPAA, upgrade existing laws, I think the odds of there being large legislation being passed in a midterm year are fairly low.
Wow. So this means that we're in the state of constant AI policy, federalism, trying to figure out states' rights, right? But isn't it just really a reflection of our society, AI, at the end of the day? I mean, yes. The rules and the values and where we go, we don't really have to recreate it. We're in it. So, I mean, we're just basically codifying. And I think in the codification process, it sounds like we don't even understand how we got here.
Well, and real quick, I would build on your comment, Ray. I often say to people, replace the word AI with human organizations. Now, granted, yes, AI can move faster, it has different scale, but it's all the same legal constraints. I want to make sure that the human organization is not being malicious towards me or acting in my worst interest, whatever it is. The same thing is true for AI. And that's why I really say, instead of trying to create one AI policy to rule them all, which upgrade the existing laws that companies have to do to make sure if they're in healthcare, they're respecting patient rights. If they're in commerce, that they're actually making sure they do the appropriate practices. So upgrade existing laws as opposed to trying to create new laws.
You know what? We should create that AI checklist for everybody as they do the upgrade. I think that's a great idea for boards to go through.
All right, I'm working with it. Maybe we can work on that.
So now, André, what does this mean, right? Our cybersecurity threats are actually going to come hit us faster than what we can do in defense. So should we just all go on offense so that we don't have to worry about defense? Just kidding. What's the one capability board should demand from their CISOs in 2026? Offensive capabilities?
Well, fortunately, the strongest use cases that are being built in cybersecurity for AI is on the defensive side and automating functions and capabilities which have been entrusted to humans through augmentation. Microsoft Copilot is a great example of a very practical, affordable, applicable tool which is in the reach of most enterprises in terms of cybersecurity augmentation and being able to detect attacks faster, being able to detect anomalies, as David said earlier, and then augmenting the human analyst. And so there's a whole range of very interesting agentic AI products that are becoming available for security operations centers that are very affordable and applicable for CISOs and would fit into most enterprise cybersecurity budgets.
If you look at the Fortune 1000 SOC, Security Operations Center, what percentage of it is autonomous today and what percentage will be autonomous by 2030? And what I mean by autonomous is that you're mitigating threats with unsupervised human intervention, and it's an agentic intelligence autonomous. Yeah, my favorite word for last year, and maybe continuing on for many, many years to come. Are we going to? Can you talk to us about the level of autonomy we'll see in a SOC in the next 5 years?
At the moment, we're at an early stage of adopting agentic AI products for the SOC, and very few CISOs have done this. And the emphasis really is on augmentation rather than complete autonomy. So deploying the agentic AI products under human supervision and taking some of the wear and tear and the long hours away from a human SOC analyst and placing it with agentic AI product. So we're still at a very early stage just in terms of thinking about human supervised applications of agentic AI and augmentation. So we're still some way away from this being the best practice across SOCs, but that's definitely where we need to go and where we will have to go. Anthropic this year disclosed for the first time that they've had a fully autonomous attack that drew on the capabilities of their large learning models. And that's definitely within the reach of several of our nation state adversaries, being able to do fully autonomous attacks. And like we've seen in drone warfare, in the war in Ukraine, that's definitely where things are heading, also in the world of cybersecurity.
Wow.
This is crazy.
Wow.
So,
Well,
David,
and it's
if
a
you've
sign
got
of
a
the times. I
brief
mean,
Fortune
if I could-
500 board on the single most.
Oh, I was just going to real quick
Oh, go
build
for
on
it. Go
what
for it.
André was saying, and then I'll go to your question, Ray. I was going to say, when he hit on that, you were seeing physical swarms and the use of autonomy for physical swarms in Ukraine. I would say the same thing needs to be thought of in the cyber realm. And as mentioned, I mean, I think we're going to see more and more AI in the loop on the attacker's side, which is, again, why I say people have to get off forensics. You got to get to patterns of life. This doesn't look normal. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't look normal. That's the only way you'll keep up. The other thing that I would say is I'm seeing there are some really sophisticated SOCs where they train, like if you're in a place that you're producing apps or you're writing code on a regular basis, you train the AI for the known critical vulnerabilities and critical vulnerable exploits. And so when you roll out new code, you let the AI do the known knowns, but you keep the humans for the unknowns, because the thing about cybersecurity is it's not steady state. The adversaries are always thinking, and so you need to get ahead of them, and AI won't have that training data. So it's really, again, I would double click on what André says. I think even in 10 years from now, you don't want to be fully autonomous as a SOC, else you'll always be behind. You want to augment.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ray. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I was thinking, like, I was going to jump to a question that's kind of related to this. So if we put AI in sovereign AI data centers or in sovereign AI approaches and let their governments, in smaller countries, that's going to happen, right? They don't have the resources.
Yes.
They're going to build out the sovereign AI capabilities. Maybe that mitigates the risk as opposed to what we're doing in a very decentralized model for in the US. Does that change the equation for André, David? What do you guys think?
Oh, I think AI is not going to respect geographical boundaries. So sovereign AI is a nice thing, but I'm like, the reality is, a packet doesn't care where it is on the internet for the most part.
But sovereign AI, on the other hand, is basically a walled
Right.
garden for that country, right? And everything comes into that walled garden, and it means that at least you're able to aggregate your cybersecurity defenses.
So what I would say, and this is actually something I wanted to bring up because we haven't talked about the fact that we know there are hardware level vulnerabilities. So if you really want to build a walled garden, then you actually have to source everything from that country. Otherwise, if you're sourcing your chips, as we know in the United States and elsewhere you're sourcing from, you may find there's exploits that look like they've built a wall when in fact they're tunneling home. And one of the things I've not seen yet that I'm still waiting for is, will we see in the United States more of a public education campaign as to what Salt Typhoon and Bolt Typhoon were? And because I don't think we've actually solved the problem of nation states reaching out, possibly through compromised hardware, to compromise U.S. companies. And I think that's the problem. So.
It's three body problem meets ET phone home,
100%. If it was easy, it would have been solved by now, but that's why André does what he does.
I want to pick up something that David said at the beginning, which is the geopolitical implications of technology. And I think this is hugely relevant to this subject of sovereign AI. The reality today is most countries have to decide on which matrix are they going to be. Are they going to be on the US matrix, or are they going to be on the matrix of the People's Republic of China? And any discussion about sovereign AI is really a presentational issue, and it's a political issue. But in reality, you're either on one of the two matrices or a hybrid of the two.
Spot on. And I think and to that point, because at the end of the day, you need a backer that can have the strong force that goes with this. And so it really is, who do you want to align to? And I know there are several Middle Eastern countries that are actually indicating, especially the Gulf, that want to figure out how they can work more closely with the US system. But I think there's also a lot of value they can provide. I was at an event 3 weeks ago. I think what we need is to start seeing US companies get the blessing from the US government to do partnerships with Middle Eastern countries, to do partnerships almost like sister city relationships, where maybe you have a hospital system in the United States, you have a hospital system in one of the Middle Eastern countries, and it's sharing both tech, but even more importantly, the practices of cybersecurity, AI, and policy.
We already in the nuclear energy sector where we invest, we already have a framework to do that in the form of 1 to 3 agreements, and the US has more than 50 1 to 3 agreements with countries around the world. And that bilateral agreement creates a safe framework for the sharing of US nuclear technology. So that's a really good model that we can expand to AI and other areas of technology.
One of the things that we have been talking about, and something I just recently blogged about, because the World Economic Forum is having a conversation around a spirit of dialogue is really their theme, is this notion of like our countries and companies going to have to quickly choose a side between China versus US. And it sounds like on your end, the answer is yes, right? Because
Yes.
everything is coming into that Cold War mentality. It's now I don't even know, like, it's not even a Cold War. It's an active, non-kinetic war going
Gray
on.
zone conflict is the word I use. It's
Gray zone conflict.
Things right at the threshold of a hot war, but just at the threshold of a hot war.
We were joking about it. Like, at some point, do I want like the U.S. government spying on me, or do I want Chinese government spying on me? You got to choose. And once you decide on that, then you got to move your entire infrastructure. And what we did see over the last year is the Middle East basically chose the U.S.
Yeah.
Right? They said, we're moving our infrastructure over to the U.S. model. So it's interesting. I don't know if it's true. So André, you're sitting out in Bahrain. I mean, tell me more. So,
well, Bahrain is a close U.S. ally. It's the host for the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Bahrain has a bilateral agreement with the U.S. called CEPA, which is the Comprehensive Security and Prosperity Agreement. This is a model that I think several of the other Gulf states have also adopted and have moved closer to the US during the Trump administration. So I think there's a lot of scope for partnership and collaboration.
My last question to you, André. We have startup founders who watch Disrupt TV. I believe you invest in late stage startups, I think 10 million revenue annually and beyond before C5 Capital is interested in the work. What do you look for? What's your, give advice to startup founders in clean energy, cybersecurity space, AI space that want to garner the attention from C5 Capital. What do they need to do to get on your radar?
Well, at the stage where we invest, the technology is already proven and there's very little technology risk. It's really about scaling up. It's about growing partnerships, both with the private sector and with the US federal government, but also growing and scaling globally. And we work very hard to help our portfolio companies to grow on a global basis. Most US startups at a mature level have sort of global sales at the rate of 20% of total sales, and we help them scale that to perhaps north of 30%. But at the end of the day, what we are looking for is leadership. We're looking for cohesive leadership teams that can really help grow and scale companies in a highly competitive environment, a very fluid environment, and an environment that's fraught with geopolitical risk. So I think the one thing that I've seen over the last 14 years since I started investing in late stage VC and growth equity is the importance of leadership as a differentiator, because the challenges for companies and the challenges for leadership have just grown, and the level of complexity that leadership teams have to deal with, as David just outlined, just referencing one domain, the regulatory domain, has just grown. So it's for us, it's all down to leadership.
Great advice. Thank you.
If I can double click real quick on what André was saying on the importance of leadership, and that can be a good segue for when Ken comes on. I was on an event, I got invited to an event in mid-December that was the general counsels of Fortune 500s. Now, normally I don't give keynotes or discussions to general counsels, usually I'm in a more tech role. But the reason why I was there is it's general counsels of Fortune 500s have publicly, or at least at this event, they have actually acknowledged they're going to have to make decisions with incomplete information. Now, I think for several of us, we recognize that's been that way for 20 or 30 years. But I think the fact that your legal risk function is now realizing that they're going to have to make risk-based legal decisions with incomplete information, that changes the very nature of leadership that was not the case, say, 25 years ago.
Great point, and a great point to end on here. We're here with André Pienaar, Chief Executive and the founder of C5 Capital, and Dr. David Bray, Distinguished Chair of the Accelerator Stimson Center and Principal CEO, LDA Ventures Incorporated. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, giving us a global perspective. So stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, André.
Thank you.
In a world of converged uncertainty, you need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. This is why you need adaptive leadership. Okay, we have a world-renowned expert and an author who's going to talk to us about that. Ken Banta, founder and CEO of the Vanguard Network and author of Seeing Around the Corner. Seeing Around the Corners, C-suite wisdom from America's most insightful leaders was published middle of last year. Seeing Around the Corners mines the wisdom of industry shaping CEOs and founders and innovators, providing straight talking guide to running and leading a business. An expert in leadership and change who aided 11 global turnarounds, mergers, and transformations for the likes of Pharmacia, Bausch & Lomb, and others, Ken wrote Seeing Around Corners to help develop high-performing leadership skills for early career, high potentials, all the way through global CEOs. So welcome, Ken, to Disrupt TV.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Hey, we're excited to have you. I think this is a seminal book, right? Helping people thinking about that notion of value exchange, understanding what's going on in terms of like making sure that people really get back to the basics. And that wisdom really from the interviews that you had out there kind of drove this. I want to know from you, why is disruption so hard? Why do we even get to this point of disruption in these organizations? Is it something they don't plan for? Is it just something that they don't proactively see? Like what's wrong with our leaders? You get the idea.
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. You know, I think that from my own experience being both on the inside of transformational situations and then externally working with senior people, you know, one aspect of this is that in an environment where change is so constant, it's really impossible for any one leader to be on top of everything. And so, you know, I think it's not so much that disruption as how do you handle it? And I think that's where, you know, really strong leaders at all levels in organizations shine, is being able to respond effectively to the unexpected or to change. And so I think disruption goes with everything. It's how you handle it that matters. And you know, we often use the word leadership as if it's in itself a positive thing, but actually there's bad leadership and there's good leadership and there's moral leadership and there's unethical leadership. And you know, people lead organizations all the time down rabbit holes and into oblivion, and other people lead things into success. So there's also a, you know, really qualitative element to leadership. It's not enough to just lead things. You got to lead them in the right direction.
So Ken, as you're advising global CEOs and founders and business leaders, and they come to you and they say, you know, Ken, help me stand out as a leader. Help me build a recommendable life and a legacy where people view me as a good leader, a great leader.
Uh-huh.
How do you help them stand out? What are the first practical steps you can take to make sure that your leadership is going to be met with open arms and optimism?
You know, as I've observed these things over the years, I've come to feel that an awful lot of that comes back to what are really sort of psychoanalytic insights. And I don't mean by that people need to be psychoanalyzed to be good leaders, but what I'm referring to are the qualities of people that come through psychoanalytic insight. And one of the most important ones, as you probably know, is this concept of self-awareness. And, you know, it's remarkable how many people who are in, at least let's just say, leadership positions, even if they're not turning out to be great leaders, often they lack that sense of perspective. And it's so important, because until you can see yourself as other people see you, you can't really be a very effective leader in a positive way. In other words, you need to see how your own actions are being understood by other people, how they're going to respond. A great example for me, you know, in a both a positive and a negative way, is that years ago I was meeting with the CEO I worked with at the time, and he said to me at that time that we were looking at moving from Europe to the US with the organization. And he just said in passing to me that he said, well, it looks pretty much like a green light for you to go, you know, be part of this team in the US. There might be a few yellow lights there, so we'll just have to think about that. So for him, it was just a comment in passing, but for me, it was a kind of existential statement, like maybe I was not ready for this. Perhaps this was a signal that I wasn't going to be invited to go there. And I remember talking to to him later about this, and he said, that's one of those moments in my own career as a CEO, that other person, he said, which I really regret in hindsight, because I realized how impactful things are when they're said to you by the CEO. It's not an ordinary conversation, and I have to be even more careful than I was at that time, because he said, in hindsight, there was no yellow light, really. I was just, there probably was somebody who said they don't like me. Well, that happens all the time. But he said, it was a real self-awareness moment for him, that being aware of how much impact you have in that kind of role can be is very important. So I think, back to what I was saying at the outset there, I think, self-awareness and understanding how you're seen by other people is one of the most important things that you can do to become a valued leader. And the other part of it kind of goes with that, which is to develop trust with people. And that doesn't mean at all just doing things they like, but it does mean being consistent, being open. I frankly don't think it means being transparent. Transparency is a kind of overused word. I mean, people are not transparent about a lot of stuff for good reasons. But, when you say something, it has to be honest. And when you say that you can't tell someone about something, that's a form of transparency as well, which is different than telling them everything they want to hear. And so I think, earning trust in that way is perhaps the second related piece that can take you a long way.
Yeah, it's hard. And as you're thinking about that, I mean, the whole notion of leadership is hard. And so how do we actually build leadership with purpose, right? You spend a lot of time talking about that, and that kind of is the foundational. That is kind of the defining notion of what a leader is trying to achieve. What do you do? How do you guide folks to think through that, or counsel them in terms of understanding what is a purpose that is higher enough for people to aspire to?
Yeah, it's a tricky one too. If you pick the wrong purpose, or you set it in the wrong way, then you find that circumstances overcome you, and then you've actually been somewhat compromised by your statement of purpose, because maybe your purpose is, if someone says that their purpose is to be the best company in the accounting advisory space in the world. And, as we're finding out now, that whole area is becoming potentially irrelevant. And so, you need to be really careful, I think, about how you frame what that purpose is. And also, in some cases, I think you have to be comfortable with changing the purpose. We often hear CEOs and board members and others talk about being consistent and never changing, their ultimate purpose and goals. But, the reality is that if the environment around you is changing, sometimes you need to change the purpose. And I think, again, really in tune leaders recognize that, and they're very comfortable. And if they've got enough self-awareness and self-composure, they'll say, look, things have changed. We need to change with them, as opposed to getting very defensive and kind of, getting into the bunker around a sense of purpose that is no longer relevant, or frankly, being the kind of leader that is no longer relevant. Jack Welch, frankly, I think might have been relevant in his day, but that style of management, I think, is down the drain.
Yeah, right. Ken, I live in Boston. Boston has got a bunch of pro sports teams that typically do well. Many decades ago, there was a guy here who played basketball. His name was Larry Bird.
Yep.
And, he was one of the best free throw shooting NBA players, not just forward, in the game. I think ended at 91% career free throw shooter. He would shoot, I think, 300 to 500 free throws before every game. Toes pointing, shoulder length apart, triangle format, follow through. Same routine, dribble the ball twice before he shot, spin the ball before he had his fingers on the seam. But when we talk about self-awareness, and most people I know are not self-aware. To me, it's like a unicorn trait. We talk about it, but again, most people I know, and maybe I need to hang out in better circles, are self-aware. But at the same time, I realize that it's a skill you need to practice, and champions aren't born, they're born in practice. Larry Bird wasn't born one of the best players to ever hold a basketball. He practiced to that level of excellence. So my question to you, can you teach leadership? Can you teach self-awareness and empathy and pragmatic optimism and humility, long-term thinking, like all these little ingredients we call the cake of good leadership, the flour, the sugar, Can you teach? Can you teach? I suspect the answer is yes, because you've written a bestseller book on teaching leadership. But it's got to be hard, right?
Well, I might actually kind of go the direction of saying you can't really teach these things in the sense of a traditional teaching. Here's a lecture, here's a book you should read, and kind of pay attention to what I said, and then you'll be great. But I think you can develop those capabilities, and I think that's a little different because development of these capabilities is often a kind of self-development exercise. So, as you were sort of implying there, by being mindful about self-awareness, you can develop it. You don't necessarily have a class in it, or you could take one. I'm not sure where it's going to get you, but I think, but actually just taking some time in the morning to think about how do other people see me, not sort of cosmic stuff of self-awareness as some, kind of huge thing up in the clouds, but more of a, how are people reacting to the way I do things? Did I, like the CO I mentioned, did you recognize that perhaps you unintentionally
words matter,
a tougher thing than you meant to, because you're being viewed in a way that you don't see yourself as a CO, you see yourself as you, but other people see you as a person whose words matter. And so I think just developing that awareness. Another thing that I personally have found valuable, because I'm certainly not always particularly self-aware, is asking people around me whether I'm in tune with them or not. Did I handle something well or not? And you have to be prepared for some fairly tough feedback, but that's, I think, a good thing. And usually the feedback is not going to be, destroy your morale. It's going to be more like, well, since you ask, I think, you could have said that a little differently. And that's, I think, step by step, that's how people develop that capability. Now, there are leaders out there, of course, who sort of succeed in a dictatorial fashion. I mean, we all know that there are corporate leaders who trample all over everybody. But, I think there's two elements to it. One is, do you really want to be like that? Probably not. And secondly, so self-respect, not just self-awareness, that's not a great way to go through life. What's going to be on your epitaph, that you trampled all over people? Not too inspiring. But also, I'm not sure that autocratic leadership leads to long-term success. I think eventually people get tired of you, people try to subvert you, people stop taking initiative because they're going to get in trouble, they just keep their head down. So there's a lot of, I think, sort of individual elements of bad results from autocratic leadership that are not always, so evident. And, if you take certain examples of this, I think they kind of tell their own story, like, say, Enron. That was essentially a bad and also ethically challenged, but also hierarchical place. And so I think when those things come together, you often see bad results in the end.
Yeah, definitely you're seeing that. And talking about bad results, talking about the need for a little bit of risk management mitigation, talk about that role of the general counsel. Like, why is that so important? Because I was surprised to see that in this.
Oh, yeah, I think, we were talking about that earlier in the show about, the speaking with a group of GCs. And I'd say that they're a very not misunderstood, but just understood, if that's a word, group. And what's not so understood about GCs is that on the surface, it looks like they're in charge of the law department, and they are, but most GCs I know and work with probably spend about 15% of their time, 15%, on law and on the law department, and the other 85% is spent on dealing with external stakeholders, evaluating situations like the Venezuela escapades and how that impacts the company, advising the board on how to work with the CEO, advising the CEO on how to deal with the board. So they play a kind of pivotal role in corporate governance and increasingly in decision-making. Probably 10 years ago, the GC wasn't usually going to be involved in a commercial decision. Now in, very big Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100, you can be certain that the GC is involved in almost any really major commercial decision, because they have a role in being sort of both the conscience and also the advisor to the rest of the team. And there's really no one else who plays that role, including with the CEO.
Conscience is it. That is the word, right? It's the conscience, the embodiment of those values, embodiment of that purpose sitting in the GC, and of course the risk.
Yeah, exactly. And risk management, you could argue, some of the CEOs I know, I've asked them, well, what is your role, what is your role in risk management? And they said, my role is risk management. You only have to look at the events of the last few days to see why they say that. But even when they see that as their main job, their kind of right-hand person is the GC on how to, risk management sounds like you actually can control risk. Generally it's more or less how to make the best of a bad situation, or how to try to avert a bad situation. That's what risk management is really all about.
I'm still thinking about self-awareness, and I recognize.
How are you doing?
I recognize I'm in the presence of a leadership whisperer. Helps leaders see around the corners. Do you think Ray and I are self-aware, or maybe I'll ask differently? How quickly, when you're in a room with a CEO or business leader, can you tell that they don't have clarity in terms of what's around the corner, or they're not self-aware? I suspect for you it's a matter of minutes, maybe seconds.
But I'm sure you would see it the same way. First of all, I think both of you are, and I think people who play the kind of role you do need to be self-aware, because you're always trying to kind of not empathize with, but connect with the people that you're talking to, and you can't do that if you're only seeing the world through your own eyes. But also, I think, you'd be probably no better or worse at it than me. And when you're in a room, you can quickly tell when someone is really, despite what they talk about, they're really self-absorbed. And we all know people who come into meetings and say, I'm really interested in what everyone here has to say, but they're not. And therefore no one even bothers to convey what they really think about anything, because there's no point. And they read the room in the same way that other person sort of doesn't read the room in terms of what's really in front of them. And so I think people who have that ability to see the world through other people's eyes, it comes through right away, and we all appreciate it. We may not articulate that, but we sort of know it, and I totally know what you. Yeah, and probably some of your guests the same way.
I've been in meetings where a person is late to the meeting and they don't apologize, and right away I've lost interest in what they may have to say, because to me, the minute if you can't respect the time of the folks in the room and simply apologize for being late, or interrupting someone, or conversely, I've been in rooms, a bunch of senior people, and the most senior person invites the lowest, most junior person in the room to start the conversation. I'm like, wow, what a great tactic to not mute the room. Go to the lowest person in terms of where they sit in the organizational chart, ask for his or her opinion, and not just start with, hey, this is what I think we should do. Well, now, what do you guys think? And you happen to be the leader of the organization. Who's going to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a terrific example. And, another element of that too, and there's sort of wheels within wheels with these things, is that, when you do invite someone who's very junior in the room to speak up, you have to be very careful to ask them the right kind of question, so that they're not put on the spot, such as, a very sort of tin ear type of question is, so as CEO, I'm planning to do this. What do you think about that, Jake? Well, Jake is going to have a kind of, deer in the headlights situation. And how can he answer that very well? Right. But if you say, Jake, we're thinking of doing the following things in the organization, but, in the environment that you're in and with your colleagues, what would your colleagues say about this if they were asked? And the reason that's a really valuable way to go is, first of all, you're not asking them to step out of their swim lane completely, but also it's really very, very effective sometimes to ask people what other people would think around them versus putting them on the spot. Because then, what do the people around you say about this? Oh, well, now they're not like throwing themselves under a train. They're reporting back. But of course, Jake is conveying something that they think, obviously they're not, or they might say most people will think this, but actually I happen to think differently. Well, okay, but you're giving them the opportunity to not have to articulate a kind of personal perspective in front of 20 other people.
That what you just shared. The whole segment's gold, but this was platinum. This was great. This was awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I love
another good example, if I may, is this the CEO of GM, Mary Barra, is been around a long time, which in itself is an indicator, because she's survived a lot of craziness. Sure. But one of the things I was really impressed by about how she operates is that every CEO these days is sort of obligated to go and have roundtable discussions with people, and they go and meet people at the factory floor. But 90 or 100, almost 100% of the time, those are of the format of, well, here I am as the CEO. What questions do you have for me about what I'm doing and where we're going as a company? And then thank you very much and good luck. Yeah. But what she does, I think, from what I've read and heard and seen, is she does something different. She goes in and says, so what is the biggest problem that you're facing in the work that you're doing? So not, not what I'm trying to do, but what you're trying to achieve at GM, whether it's making the brakes work in cars or turn the headlights on or whatever it is. What's the biggest challenge to this work? And then, that gives people something they're grounded in, that's what they know about. And then she doesn't say, well, let me take care of it. She says, let's spend the next 45 minutes talking about how I can help with that problem and get people who work for me to help you with that problem. But I need to understand, what is that real problem? Is it a problem of supply chain? Is it a problem of people above you not paying attention to what's going on? Whatever it is. So at the end of the 45 minutes, she's got a pretty clear idea, and they feel like she really is listening. And then she goes away and says, so let me think about this, and I'll send you a note about what my action steps are around this. But you let me know if those are getting us anywhere, and I'll come back to you in a month. So that's
extraordinary. Extraordinary. That's amazing. That's awesome. So by doing that, Mary has not only situational awareness based on that particular individual in a particular line of business doing a particular type of work, but she's expanding her horizontal awareness to determine, is the company aligned with the right set of core values and aligned in terms of being able to, raise their hand and talk to potential areas of improvement. So both situational and horizontal awareness is expanded through this incredible practice that's highly personalized and goes beyond just shaking hands and kissing babies. It's not a photo op. It's meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, I'm sure it doesn't work perfectly all the time, but when it's working well, I think it gives her a kind of really important line of sight into the way things get decided in the organization. Now, she's not casting aspersions on anybody or pointing any fingers, but by hearing from people things that are working, things that aren't, she can then work her way back to the things that aren't working. Is that a structural problem? Is it a people problem? Is it a communication problem? Because she may say to herself privately, but I've made a point of saying that we have to get these types of this kind of data back up to the top very quickly, but I'm not hearing it. So something's going wrong in the middle, and it's maybe not that any one person is causing the problem, but there might be a systemic problem that she can now delve into, because you diagnose, it's hard to diagnose things from the top in a macro way, but when you delve into the detail, then you can really work your way back. And another CEO who I think very highly of, who said that their job is always to fly like an eagle and dive like a seagull. And by that, they meant they do need to have a view of 100, well, maybe 60,000 foot view of what's going on, but they have to be able to dive in at any moment and see what's happening. And the same person said, sometimes they get criticized for micromanaging, and they said, it's not micromanaging when I dive in to see what's going on. It's managing, because I then go back to where I was, but now I have identified an issue that needs correcting, and I wouldn't have figured that out if I stayed at the 60,000 feet. So
fantastic. I'm going to end with a sports analogy. Ken, you hit a grand slam on our segment. That was great. Really.
Oh, good. Well, it's been great to be with you guys. And also the previous conversation was terrific about the equally important stuff around risk and cybersecurity. So
we're here with Ken Banta, founder and CEO of the Vanguard Network and author of this new book, Seeing Around Corners. Definitely check it out. Get it where books are sold, such as Amazon. Thanks for being on the show and sharing your insights. We'll see you back in the green room.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Wow, that was great. So yeah, cybersecurity, AI, adaptive leadership, and being able to see around the corner. Good way to start 2026, Ray, because this is going to continue to be a year of converged uncertainty. So we need folks like our exceptional guests to come and help us in terms of how we think and how we do. Your thoughts on the segment, and certainly being at CES, you must have a lot of thoughts about.
Well, try to keep it brief. I know we're running out of time, but I think the more important thing to think about here was really that there is a convergence between cybersecurity, AI, and the human factor. It's going to be important over time because we basically budgeting in silos and not thinking about systems. And I thought that what was really important here was the fact that quantum doesn't look like it's far off, and more importantly, cybersecurity is going to be around for quite some time as well. So we're not going to get away with that. With with our friend Ken, I think what we're really thinking about is how does leadership change, and what can you do to upgrade your organizations to be able to, see around corners, for lack of a better word. And why is that important? Well, there's almost there's almost like $35 billion in corporate transformation consulting that's out there. And I think what we have to think about is the fact that why do they fail? Why do they succeed? These are big tasks. And more importantly, how not to get disrupted.
Amazing Chat GPT 10 summary of our
real.
Yeah. You're 4 ahead of what's available commercially at 6. So that's the Ray Wang version. Ray, did you know, can you guess how many interviews we've done in the near 10-year anniversary of DisrupTV?
I don't know. I want to think maybe 1,000, I hope.
We've done 1,458 interviews.
There you go.
1,458. Do you know who was our first interview?
I do. And is she coming back?
Yes. So we've done 1,458. By next week, we'll do 1,460 because we have 2 guests, or maybe 3 guests, 60, 61. But our first guest, when we launched in 2016, 10 years ago, was Whitney Johnson, founder and CEO at Disruption Advisors, and a multi-best-selling author of a number of books that are behind me. So Whitney will join us. I'm super excited about that, to almost celebrate our 10-year anniversary. And we have Dean E. Carter and Mark Levy, co-authors of Employee Experience Design, How to Co-Create Work Where People and Organizations Thrive, as our guests. So we're starting 2026. Again, with every show, we feature at least one author. And so hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have, like we've had in the last 3 years, roughly 70 to 75 authors every year for the last 3 years.
Which means we have to go pick the best authors that year, which
crazy. Means we have to go pick. Yeah, we always end every calendar year with spirited conversations between L, you, and I. But if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching our first episode on our 10-year anniversary of 2026. We look forward to seeing you here next week after the big NRF retail show in New York, where Ray and I are going to be. So by the way, if you're in New York or you're at NRF Javits Center, come and say hi. And if you're an interesting person and you have something interesting to say, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll see everybody there. So